Good morning. Welcome to Alien Dungeon. My name is Jeff, and I'm here with Ernie, and we're here to talk to you today about Fanticide and give you a little bit more information about the game, the setting, the rules, and any other things you may be interested in. So, first up, why do another fantasy miniature game?
That's a really good question. The market certainly seems to have plenty of them. It started with a conversation, to be honest, about almost 5-6 months ago, I guess, at least, where we were talking around the table about why we, as a group of people, weren't playing fantasy games anymore. And we came to the conclusion that the number one reason is that they had become very complicated, very rigid, and many of them required an awful lot of models. And that had turned most of us off. So we wanted to do something that kind of bucked all those trends.
Okay, that makes sense. Looking at all these great models arrayed on the table, can you discuss a little bit about them? They have a different feel than your average model out there today, a more old school look.
They do. Somebody on a forum mentioned that we had that 1985 called and they wanted their models back. Bit harsh, but we always think those kinds of things are funny. Not necessarily true. These are very well sculpted models, I think, for what they are. They're simple. They are not covered with the usual levels of detail that you see in terms of uniforms and the rest in a lot of fantasy models. The Liberi are a really classic example of this. It's a very realistic proportioned centaur, if you want to think about a realistically proportioned centaur that's very much in keeping with the Native American feel. These are ponies. Most Native Americans in the Plains War would ride painted ponies. And we wanted that feel, so that's what this model captures. And it's a simple model that's very elegant and very easy to paint and very fast to get on the gaming table, and that was very important to us. We're not after trying to produce a collector's range of models. What we wanted to do is produce a miniatures game with miniatures that were quick and fast to paint and get on the table.
Great.
That's what we did.
So what's the best way to get started?
The best way to get started right now actually is to visit our Kickstarter. I think it's up for another 4 days right now. But for $45, with a pledge level at that, like that, you're going to get the rule book, you're going to get the entire card deck that goes with it, which is really important. You're going to get a sampling of the models, you're going to get one of our unicorn models, which is an important part of the gameplay as an event. And you certainly aren't ever going to get a better deal on Fanticide than at that level. So I think that's what I'd recommend right now, is that.
Excellent. Outside of Kickstarter, what is a cost average for getting into Fanticide?
That's a good question. Well, it's the rule book, really, and the card set that all comes together. The retail price on that will be $55 when they release it. And you're getting a very nice quality rule book. It was very important to us to do that.
It is a hardback, correct?
It is. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And I'll explain why we chose to do that instead of a PDF, for example. But that's all you really need to play, because most of us all have a collection of fantasy models at home. So if you get the rule book and you've already got some fantasy models at home, it's a great way to get started. That would be step one. If you like the universe that we're creating, which we think is really cool, and we spent a lot of time to get that right, just a couple of the unit packs that will be sold in blisters, or perhaps even one of the starter boxes, would be more than sufficient to get you going.
Excellent. That's very exciting. So, when you think about the gameplay, you talked about this card deck. How does that factor in to the game?
Well, we wanted something that would play where tactics were very important, even with a 30 model group. This is a Liberi army, for example. It's on the table. It's got its Peeves, it's got its Crushers, which are the heavy infantry, it's got a unit of Spears, but it all centers around actually the legend. And it doesn't center around him in a traditional fantasy game sense where he's all powerful. It's because of his command and control ability that really makes the difference in the game. So this guy is very busy during the game commanding these units to move. And with that an I-go-you-go system where everything is driven by what cards come up, having that commander have the flexibility to get your units to react when you want them to rather than your opponent is very important.
Now, as a commander, he gets multiple cards in a deck, right?
He does. In fact, that particular legend model gets 3 cards, which basically means every turn he gets to take 3 actions.
And he can command another unit to act or himself act in turn.
He can, and more often than not, you're going to find your legend doing that than wanting to put them in the personal combat.
Right.
And that gives you that feel of the leader of a war band trying to get his men, or in this case centaurs, to do what he wants them to do.
Talk a little bit about the world of Nowhere. You said it's an open-ended game. How does, if I want to create a war band of something completely different, how does that fit into the universe?
Well, the universe is driven. It's this world that is literally just this like flat tabletop floating in the nothing. Okay, and right through the center of it is a hole, which is some kind of strange vortex that all kinds of stuff comes through the hole and ends up in nowhere. And either survives or doesn't, and if it survives, it organizes itself, or that race will organize itself, and that's how we come up with our war bands. And we spent a lot of time explaining how that works, and we think we've got something pretty exciting about that.
That's great.
The war bands themselves and how you get to create those is there's an appendix in the back of the book that basically allows you to stat up models that will fit in really well with the game. It's a fun system. Just creating war bands alone is kind of an entertaining hobby.
Yeah, I can imagine. I already have tons of ideas churning around and how they'll fit into the world of Nowhere and things like that. So why are we on Kickstarter? If the game is so far along, why did you decide to go with Kickstarter?
When you start a brand new company in a very crowded market, in a very loud and noisy world, it's all about trying to garner attention. And right now, Kickstarter gets lots of attention from miniature gamers and video gamers all around the world. So we kind of felt that we had to be on Kickstarter to legitimize ourselves and send the signal about how intent we are and how serious we are as a company. This is only our first game. One of the next things we're going to be doing. We have lots of games lined up, and we're doing lots of things all at the same time. But we wanted to make sure Fanticide got out to a wide audience. That's what Kickstarter is about. It was also to make sure we were gauging support and interest. And I'm very pleased at how well it's done on Kickstarter.
Excellent. One thing people have asked a lot about is why isn't there an electronic version of the book? Why are we just doing a book versus a PDF or ebook thing? So what's your take on that?
Well, I can understand why people want that. I'm really into electronic books myself, and I think it's a wonderful format, and we've got lots of ideas for future product where we're going to really be exploiting what's relatively new technology. But with Fanticide, it didn't make sense, because here's a brand new game with a brand new background, if you will, and we needed something to put out to the world that reflected that. This is a wild, crazy, whimsical, grim fairy tale world, and what better way to present it to the people for the first time than through a fairy tale book? And that's what we created. We've actually used archival quality paper, archival quality inks. It's got these beautiful, crisp end papers in it, and it's got this nice, thick, heavy cover. It looks like something in some ways that you would have been able to purchase 50 years ago, but that's very much in keeping with what Fanticide is all about.
That great never-ending story feel you found in a dusty old attic.
Exactly. It's like something you find there. And to be honest, Fanticide is very much inspired by those kinds of books that my great-grandmother, who was a very avid reader, had on hand. And I got to read all those books when I was a child because I could go to her house and pull them off her shelf, blow the dust off of them, so to speak, and read them. And that's what the world of Nowhere and Fanticide is all about, those old fairy tales.
Great. What about the long-term plans? Tournaments, campaign play? How is that going to factor in?
Right from the very beginning, campaign play in particular was a personal interest to all the designers. Remember, I've talked about Fanticide as being something very self-indulgent, something we wanted to play, and campaigns fit into that. We do have a campaign system developed. We thought that it might be a distraction during the initial launch, so we're going to actually post the campaign process up for free on the internet after a couple of months have gone by, and we've got the game out there and got some feel for how people were reacting to it. The tournament side of it, the game has been written right from the beginning to make tournament play work. And there's a couple reasons for that. Not just for tournament players, but for anybody to get that first game of Fanticide or to get their friends to play that first game of Fanticide. Games are always a lot easier when you can explain that this is a 1,000-point Leverie army versus a 1,000-point Fey army. People understand the equality between those armies that way, and that's very important. We will definitely be on the tournament circuit. We have lots of ideas for that. That's all connected into our Warhost program, which is something else I'm very excited about. We'll talk in a separate video perhaps about that sometime. The tournament play we think is essential for supporting brick and mortar shops. Being at conventions, we really want to make sure it happens.
Great. And we may even see our first tournament as soon as fall in or something coming
I'd
up.
love to have a tournament as early as October, November.
Great.
The book will be here in about 2 more weeks, I think, and then we can start shipping it out. I'm very excited about that.
Excellent. And finally, we'll wrap up. Where do we go from here? I know there's a poll right now online about some future warband ideas. What do we want to do next?
Well, lots of warband ideas because One of the nice things about Fanticide is it allows us to start exploring fantasy armies that people haven't seen before. So I definitely suggest you go over and check out the blog or look on the website for some of our initial concepts. And those are the ones that made it through the first pass, because the truth of it is we've got about a dozen. The thing for us that'll be interesting is making sure that we're not just introducing more figures for figure's sake, that the armies have a reason entendre, so to speak, that there's a reason to have them in the gameplay. The background supports just about anything we want to do, so we're pretty excited about that. We're really having a lot of fun working on new stuff.
Great. Well, thank you for taking the time, and hopefully people now have a better idea of what Fanticide is. For more information, head over to www.aliendungeon.com and also check out Alien Dungeon on Kickstarter.com.
May I also add to that, Jeff, that one of the things that we're really big on in Alien Dungeon going forward is we really want a lot of community involvement.
Absolutely.
So this is, thank you for your patience in sitting through this. I think these things can be really boring, but we're trying our best to get information out to you. Please email us, okay, and ask us questions. And what Jeff and I will do is we'll process those questions, and every so often, whenever we can, we're going to put up a video like this and try to answer questions for you just as much as we can.
And we're both very active on our forums, as well as our designers we're getting on board. So join our forums on aliendungeon.com, and you'll have a pipeline right into the crazy mind that is Alien Dungeon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.